All right. Well, greetings, everybody. Um, this is our lesson two on diagonals and use of diagonals in the middle game in chess. In the previous examples, we looked at
Did you say?
some
Did you say in chess, as opposed to checkers?
in chess,
I'm
yes,
I'm just giving you a
as
hard time.
opposed to
That's all right.
checkers. Well, some folks play chess like checkers. So
Yeah.
there is even a game called, was it Take Me Chess, where you have to take everything that they give you.
Right.
Kids love this one. So there's official excuse to blunder.
Yeah.
So diagonals are obviously a big deal, and I always, when I teach kids to play with bishops, I always tell them the bishop is a mini queen because the big scheme of things it is because it makes half of the move that the queen makes. The other half is a rook move. But if you look at bishop this way, you actually appreciate its power a lot more. Now, in this particular position, it is black's turn. You can clearly see that the sides are fighting for this big dark diagonal a1 h8, and the um, black player is to move, and therefore they look at this position and think, okay, well, white is about to push the d pawn up. In that case, it's going to tie up one of my rooks there, and if I move the knight, I end up checkmating on g7. So bishop on c3 is a major obstacle in just about every single plan that there is. And obviously, rook is worth more in points than the bishop, but not in every single position. And this is one of them where one mini queen bishop is better than the other mini queen rook. How so? Well, there is an X-ray attack on the square b2 from the bishop on g7. There is an attack on b2 from the queen. So there is a connection between the two, but in the middle, there's a couple of pieces. And the rook from c8 or e8, for that matter, can easily get to b2. So b2
Oh, B2.
is
Okay.
kind of a critical square in this entire arrangement. But if you play a rook b8, kind of try to get it going on that angle, then after d6, you're going to have to start dealing with.
Oh, I'm not sure if that's my internet or yours, but we
My
just pick it up.
connection is working really well.
Okay. Okay.
I tested it before I connected.
Okay. All right.
So in this position here, like I said, if you play rook b8, trying to kind of connect another piece to b2, it sounds good on paper, but technically it does not really work well because after d6, you're going to have to deal with the issue of the pawn approaching uh, the promotion square, which d7, and creating all kinds of tactical problems. In addition to that, you're not really having time to bring rook c8, which would be a second rook to try to neutralize the bishop with, because after something like d7, that rook will have to return where it came from,
Mm-hmm.
because else you're dealing with promotion. So black doesn't have a luxury of kind of trying to reposition slowly. And in a situation like this, you kind of need to weigh this. If you think about this in a slightly different way, let's say you have two rooks, rook on e8 and rook on c8. The c8 rook can engage to c3 or b8, and the e8 rook is purely defensive piece. So what you do here, you sack the rook on c3, he takes on c3, removes that bishop, creates immediate tactical
Do you want
threats.
to press the button, the forward key button? Yay.
And you immediately solve all other issues that were appearing in this diagonal. And after queen c3, now the queen is in danger of discovery, and the next move is knight c4.
Nice.
And queen takes c4 immediately loses to checkmate.
Very nice.
So now you connect it to b2 in multiple ways all at once, and defenses are very few. For instance, what do you really do here? Let's say you go queen c2, very obvious move. In that case, knight takes on a3, pawn takes, and after rook b8, you can see how hopeless this position immediately becomes. Because after king c1, you have a very cute bishop
Oh
b2.
yeah. Right. Right.
Bishop takes a3 with
Oh.
massive losses followed by checkmate.
Nice. That's cool. But wait a second. If knight c4 is so strong, why don't we play that on our first move?
We're going to get checkmate on g7. Otherwise, it's a good idea.
Yeah. Do you want to show
Again,
that?
see, we didn't remove defender of b2. That's the key issue here. I mean, it's a minor item that you get checkmated, but
Minor.
the connection is really broken because, okay, we're not really with this move threatening checkmate, are we? We're threatening the queen, but we're pretty much neglecting our own problems.
Right.
So here, we terminate the bishop, immediately creating attack on b2. b2 becomes more vulnerable.
Right, right.
This is almost it. So is this the end of the game? No. Queen goes to b4. Now, clearly a very challenging position. We can win the pawn. Not necessarily a terrible thing, but after knight c2, no mate, we are going to pin ourselves, and rook e1 is up in the air. So suddenly the position becomes a little messier than one would want.
Sure, yeah.
So what do we do if we can't take the pawn? Well, we need to focus on our original plan, and the original plan is what? Attacking b2. So we connected the queen and the bishop and the knight to it, but the queen is a known defender. So very simple technical approach. You've got two attacks, actually three attacks and two defenders. So you just play a5.
Nice.
Hit the defender where it hurts. Now, there's no time on rook g1. Counterattacks like that simply don't work because after check on e4, the queen remains under attack while black queen moved away. And you don't really have any other way to attack black queen. The only counterattack you think of. You can't take on c4 just all the same. You get mated.
But you can go down the b file.
You got to go down the b file. So you have to go something like queen b3. And after queen b3, knight takes on a3. Queen takes, and rook b8, actually. I was actually liking queen e4 as well, but this is simpler. Now, once again, b3 has to be played. Otherwise, rook takes b2 check.
Nice.
After queen e4, the game is over.
Two diagonals happening here. Boom, boom. Yeah.
Yep, very much so. And you have to play king c1, and after rook c8, they catch up with you.
Right, right. And then let's go back a couple of turns. So what was the other try there? So if takes here on a3, was there b takes a3?
Yes, there was the b takes a3, and in that case, again, the queen comes with a decisive effect here. Queen takes e4 check.
Oh, still the same thing, yeah.
Now you can't move the rook because the h1 is undefended.
Oh, another diagonal there too.
You have to play queen d3. When you play queen d3, rook goes to b8, king c1, rook goes to c8. Now, can we go to d2?
Seems like it, but probably not.
The unfortunate answer is no.
Oh, look at that. Cool.
Coming from another angle.
I really
have
like
to go king b1.
I really like all that. Like you, okay, I'll finish up this one, and then I want to say something about a second ago. Yeah.
And then what do we do here? You got this really mind-boggling open diagonal.
Queen e5.
Sorry.
Kapow! Very cool. I want to go back. So this is neat too. How you have, in that position, you have the king is unsafe on each one of these. And all the pieces are helping. So this one's covering these two, and then the queen's covering these two, and then the rook is about to help with c1. That's probably the hardest connection to see. Maybe is that the rook is going to be most helpful to guard the only square that's not on these diagonals. So that's kind of cool how they're all working together really well.
Yeah, it's a great team effort here. You can see that the rook from h1 never really got into the game.
Yeah.
And never participated in anything. So you can see here that this position is immediately hopeless. And in this situation, you could probably win multiple ways. But I really like kind of a clarity of forcing the king to b1 and then a very nice checkmate on a1.
Yeah, that's
The
nice.
conceivable way to stop it is to play queen d4. So white resigned, but he could have delayed this issue a little bit, but practically the end game where you're down pretty much a whole piece, it's not really a competitive matter. It's just a matter.
Right, right,
It's the
exactly.
remaining pawn here. You see there, very easy walk to your pawn and capture it.
Right.
So a very nice use of diagonal that just exploited the vulnerability of b2. And this is actually very common for the King's Indian fianchetto positions. The bishop, a lot of times, if diagonal is wide open in multiple pieces of bishop, bishop is sometimes worth more than rook,
Wow.
especially in the dragon kind of positions where castle, queen side making b2.
Yeah. And so when you have a bishop on, c4, so if a bishop comes out this way at the beginning of the game, and you have one that's on g7, would you say that this one's worth like 3.8 or something? What value would you give a fianchetto bishop, just right off the bat when it goes there?
I would guess 4 or somewhere there if you think about it. I think the fianchetto bishop in King's Indian positions and the is rarely given up because the thinking is it's just more valuable than the knight, for instance, or a like kind bishop. If you can keep it, by all means, you should.
Yeah.
And specifically, you do that so you can get a position like this where the bishop is wide open and can participate in the combo with the queen and some other pieces.
By contrast to maybe like the end game, for example, what value would you give the king in the end game?
I never thought about this, but generally speaking, king's value is a little bit higher than a pawn. I would guess it's about 2 and pawn is about 1. What is the king? It's basically a tall pawn
Yeah.
that
So,
sometimes actually can move backwards into the sideways.
well, Jacob
Otherwise,
Agard said that it's worth 4 points. He says more than a minor piece, less than a rook. Would you agree with that?
he's kidding.
What's that?
He was kidding.
He's kidding? No
I
way.
think so. There's no way that the king is worth 4 points. I
Okay.
mean, give me a break. If you got a position where the king entered the territory where like 3 pawns in the 7th rank and they've got nowhere to run, sure, it's worth 4 points. But in any other position, there is no way that it's worth 4 points.
Okay, wait a second. So,
Let me ask you this: can
yeah.
the king beat knight and a pawn?
I'm not sure.
Answer no, right?
Yeah.
No is like losing 99 times out of 100. So
Hold on.
how can it be worth 4 points?
I just looked this up, so I want to know. And so the purpose of how this connects to the diagonal stuff is just understanding the relative value of the pieces. The bishop becomes so strong when it's over here that it seems, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's maybe worth discussing just for a second. How much is the king worth in the end game? Hold on.
Well,
Okay.
I'm sure Mr. Egger was just trying to make some sort of
Okay.
I guess, illustrious point and attract attention, but I would bet him even money that this was a joke.
Really? In the end game, when the king is usually a little danger of checkmate, the fighting value of the king is about 4 points. Lasker even said that.
Okay.
Do you stand corrected?
Because
What do you think?
I dismiss all of that as nonsense.
All right, fair enough. But yeah, your point is definitely taken that the bishop really does become super strong right here on that long diagonal.
Yes, well, actually, Bobby Fischer used to say that rook and 2 bishops are stronger than 2 rooks and a knight.
Yeah. Okay.
So there are some positions like that, not all of them, but there are definitely some positions like that. If the diagonal is wide open and the rook is assisting the bishop's attack and a couple of pawns along the way doing the same, the bishop is just a little monster.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do call it mini queen for a reason.
Yeah.
Because in some positions it plays with the queen especially, it's like 2 queens terrorizing the position.
Right.
Very
Well,
powerful piece.
like that one you had where it was the queen on e4, and then there was this, right? Because the queen is almost kind of acting as a bishop here, right?
Yeah. I mean, in a way it is.
Yeah.
It performs the bishop's duties, but it has this nasty ability to move like a rook if it wants to.
Yeah. All right, cool stuff. Example number 2. Yeah?
Example number 2.
Let's do it. All right, I'll click on it for you. What are we looking at here?
Well, example number 2 is a complicated game by Tigran Petrosian, and it is not a clear one-sided game. It's more of an illustration of a point what the bishop can be in some positions, and also probably an illustration of a point of how one should not play against the bishop in a position like this, and what defense should do in a situation like this. Petrosian here has a very nice bishop on g2 that looks at c6. And when you have a fianchetto bishop, your plan is really only one and the same. You need to open it up. Otherwise, there's no point in it. And in this position, you can see the white pawns lined up really nicely. They are preparing to advance forward. But until there is some opening, all of that is very nice picture, but not much else. I call it kind of like a spring coil moment. White has an energy of multiple pieces aimed at the queen side, but until the pawn barrier is removed, the spring coil basically stands passive. So Petrosian here can go to b5 and d5 with the knight if the pawn isn't there. The b rook can attack b6 if the pawn isn't there, but the pawn is. So what do? You need to remove it. Just plays b5. You more or less have to take. Pawn takes, and this is very interesting moment in the game. Now, Hans Rey, a Dutch player, a Dutch grandmaster, I believe, played c5. I believe it's a very passive approach, and you always need to think about some sort of a counterplay in a position like this. And the counterplay in this situation can be possibly involving for black to play e4 at some. At any rate, you need to get some opening for some pieces to be able to reach into white's position. Like if you think about this, outside of the rook a7, there is simply no piece that reaches into white's territory from the black side.
Right, right.
I mean, you can't really attack c4 here because it's guarded by a pawn. So what Hans Rey should have done, he should have taken on b5 instead. It looks counterintuitive because it makes b6 weak, but it does provide some openings, and it's a very interesting situation. Let's say it goes knight to b5, rook a6, and then knight c3. So now he exposed the b pawn to the attack, but the b6 is protected, and a very interesting move, knight e7, opens up the attack on h3, delaying castling.
I just want to say for those of you guys listening here too, like what he means by that, right, is that by going c5, the b pawn is protected by white's own b pawn. So maybe a concern that black had was, well, if I go here, then the rook is eventually going to put some pressure. That's what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah. Yes, he probably thought about it this way, but he didn't really think about it in the way that he needed to think about it.
Sure,
he needed to think about some ways of finding a counterplay for his pieces. And to obtain some kind of counterplay, he needs to have some opening into black's territory. You cannot really have a counterplay behind the wall of pawns.
Yeah.
That's just simply not possible. You need to have some openings for your pieces to strike into opponent's position.
Got it.
And with c5, that's simply not an option. So c takes b actually offers him some opportunity. Let's say knight takes b5, rook a6, knight c3 opens up a knight e7. Now, defensive move and defense of two different things. First of all, d5 square is protected from invasion by the knight. And secondly, the pawn h is looked at. For instance, if you castle, there you go. Suddenly you have a visitor that captures your pawn. Not a nice surprise, right? And you haven't won anything yet. Now, if you want to take on h3, queen h3, and then h4, your own king is going to be in big trouble.
These are some great examples. Look at that. You got this diagonal happening here. You talked about the e4 break to get this one opened up, and then even this diagonal. Where do you come up with these?
Well, I actually found this a chess book on a middle game. I think it was an Israeli master or grandmaster wrote it.
Oh,
okay. I picked them some games from there. Very interesting games. They're not really thoroughly annotated, but the example themselves are very good. They do sometimes I pick a chess book and I spend a fair amount of time analyzing the position.
Yeah.
And when you write a book, you really don't have a lot of time to analyze every single position. You need to
Right.
analyze maybe 100 of positions, and you don't want to work with for 6 months. You want to be done like in a month or two.
Right.
So you put some reasonable effort. You point out to some things, but you really don't have enough time to give every position what it needs.
That's interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, is these authors that come with examples that there's more to it than even they describe. You know.
More than that, yes. There's a lot of times they pick a good example, but they just don't have time necessary to indulge every single possibility. Whereas if you pick a couple of positions, you can spend a little more time on them, and you're not writing a book. You're not, obligated to anything. So you just look at, okay, well, this looks good. This looks good. What about this? So here I found some interesting defenses for black that you mentioned in the book. So you play knight e7 here, and you put the h pawn on notice. And let's say it goes queen b3, tries to put the queen in play, controlling d5 better, potentially threatening maybe queen b5 at some point. Now, after knight c6, the knight introduces itself into the game. Again, you still can't castle because h3 is still weak. And if you play e3 not to let the knight to d4, then the knight comes back to e7. And the question is, well, why in the world did you do that? Well, the idea was to kind of make d pawn a little bit loose.
Mm.
And now you play rook g8. And the position offers some counterplay. Again, it's not a position where you're definitely doing really great and you solved all your problems. But you definitely have a situation where you have some counterplay and some possibilities.
Very double-edged here, yeah.
If white steals slightly better, I think the question is yes, definitely so. But if you compare this to the position in the game, it's night and day. In the game, he basically had no play whatsoever. So what's wrong with c5? And again, even after c5, there are some opportunities. I think black just misunderstood the position. Petrosian was a really, really good positional player, whereas Raya had played chess also for some time for a Dutch team, and by all means a good grandmaster, but obviously not of the same level. So after c takes, c takes, b5 was not played, and c5 was played. Now rook a1. I'm sorry, sneeze.
And I wanted to add too that the difference between Petrosian and Rih here is a rating difference about 200 points. So a lot of players wonder like how do players distinguish themselves at those higher levels, and it's really advanced strategic stuff like Georgi's talking about that really makes up for that difference.
That's correct. So here Rih made a mistake that, in my opinion, cost him a game later on. Now he made the most obvious move, queen b8. Problem with that move is that after the trade on a7, eventually, queen doesn't really have a way of holding its position. And when it's going to either take on a1, it's going to surrender the a file. But if it's going to go back, then it's just simply going to be in a situation where it's going to be itself very passive. And it's also going to block the rook on f8 as well. So what he should have done is he should have taken on a1 instead. Instead of this move, he should have taken on a1. After queen a1, we play queen d7. Now, why is that important? Because it allows the rook take the defensive position. So instead of standing on b8 like a bystander that doesn't participate in the game, the rook actually does participate in the game. And let's say bishop goes to c6, queen d8, knight d5, knight d4. The position remains playable. It's not a great position, but it's definitely a position where there are some things. Now, I feel like in this position, white stands better, but it's not really that simple, and there are some challenges to overcome. For instance, if the knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, and rook goes to c8, what do you do? You probably want to play c7. Seems like a great move. Seems like a good idea, but can black somehow overcome this and win the pawn on c7?
Queen d7, knight b6,
so,
queen
d7 is actually possible.
Yeah, right.
Because of this.
Right.
And actually, if black is, I'd be surprised if black is not winning here.
Yeah.
Because knight d7, rook takes a7, threatens check on the bottom rank. You
Youch.
can't play knight b6, but if you can't play knight b6, your knight is about to depart anyway. Bishop takes d5 is going to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
c7 pawn goes downhill. So I don't know if all of that is, for instance, particularly necessary. Like I was looking at this position here, and I said, well, do I really want to play knight d5 and end up in that situation? I think I would not do this. I would probably consider h4 instead.
Mm.
My thinking here is, as long as I control the square a8, I'm probably because let's say he goes knight d4, positions the knight really well, and I retreat back to g2, still control that square. Now, there are a few things to think about. For instance, you can play knight c2 check, king f1, and knight d4. Can take my king off balance. But maybe this is not really such a big deal. Eventually, I'll find the way to get my king into the game. Maybe I'll play king f1, and then I'll play knight d5 at that position. Put pressure on the pawn b.
Sure.
And if he goes rook a8, I can take on a8 and play knight e7 check and win the queen on a8. So this again, however, you can see that in this position, black creates some tactical problems for white. He's fighting. It's not a one-sided deal. Now, after queen b8, there's the Trojan castle. He played rook d8, and then Trojan took on a7 and played queen e1. And that's what I was talking about. Suddenly, the rook is passive, and the queen either has to take or retreat or what else. Let's say you go to d7, that's what you did in the game. Petrosian played queen a6 and he just resigned.
Oh, wow.
Resigning here was, in my opinion, premature. I think he should have continued playing, but he probably considered, this is a very passive position. I'm going to lose after about 10 or 15 home. I don't want this.
Yeah.
And people do that sometimes. I mean, I don't know if this is position that he actually needs to resign upon. Let's take a look at Stockfish. What's a Stockfish thinking about this? Well, I mean, the good news is, and the good news from his perspective is that Stockfish thinks that he is lost.
It's saying
the bad news, in my opinion, he kind of deprived us of the rest of this potentially very good study example. Yeah. How to win the game was the only open file in the full control.
That son of a gun. We missed out on an instructional opportunity here.
Instructional video here. So queen b8, let's say queen a6 is probably the easiest loss because after rook a7 you get arrested by the bishop.
Oh yeah, knight b5 coming in, yeah.
Knight d5 coming in, rook d1 coming in, and what does bishop d7, rook b1, and game is over. What's the alternative? The alternative is queen b8, obviously, right? The most obvious retreat.
Yeah.
Knight a4. Now, if rook a7, there is queen takes b.
Sure.
Now, was there a better move? Was rook a1, for instance, possible? That's another thing I was thinking about. I think it's definitely possible just to do this. There's no need for knight a4 immediately. Because if you actually think about this, black is more or less paralyzed. There really isn't anything going on here. Now, there are some tactics like knight b3. You have to pay attention to that. The computer thinks bishop g5 is a really good move. I like rook a2. Kind of avoiding all this business with e4 sacks and stuff like that. Now after e4, what are you attacking? There is nobody there.
Yeah.
Still, you could see that in this kinds of positions, this could be a venue of counterplay. What does this move do? It actually puts the pawn in under 3 attacks, but every single one of them has some kind of a flow.
Sure. But I'm more curious to see what exactly does white do if black just shuffles? Like let's say they just go right here. How exactly do you make some of this? Because I see you have this target, But how would you proceed here?
Um, Great question. I would think that in this position here, we probably want to play bishop g5, kind of keep the king out of the way and preparing queen a8. And you have to play f6 to get rid of this. Bishop goes back to e3. And let's say you go king f7, tries to kind of like hold it on, like you said. Knight d5. The biggest problem here is you just don't have a way of controlling b6. You
Mm.
at some point have to take on d5 to get rid of the attack on b7.
Okay.
But once you do that, you see that bishop is a little monster. It just absolutely controls everything in the position.
Yeah.
And now Stockfish actually suggests this to take here and play queen a8.
Right. Right.
Kind of a very primitive approach. You simply trade off the queens, and after that you play rook b8. Now, can he play rook d8? Tries to do the queen trade, the rook trade. I'm sorry. Well, he can, but not really successful anyway.
Oh, I get it.
We come back to a6.
Or even fancier. I like this technique going here. I'm just reading what it says, and then rook d7, and then rook a6. That's fancy.
Yeah. Or rook a6 immediately, and then rook b8, then rook a7 check. I mean,
Oh yeah. Okay. Right. Right.
rook f7.
I like
So
that even better. Yeah.
you can see the bishop on d5 is a mini queen, and the bishop on g7 is a tall pawn.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the two. So people say, what's a good bishop? Well, you see bishop on d5, clearly a good bishop, and you see bishop on g7. That's in the definition of a bad bishop.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Completely left up, has no targets whatsoever, no contribution to the game.
Yeah.
So after queen a6, Mr. Ray just called it a day.
Yeah. Some
So
games are kind of
what
like
was
that though, because if you get to the end game and you just feel like you've been outplayed the whole time, it's not necessarily the case that things are just going to turn around for you. A lot of times, the quality of the difference in play will continue. So, I mean, I can definitely relate. Sometimes it's good to just sort of save energy. Do you ever do that? Just you go out, forget it, and you just conserve energy for the next one.
no.
You don't do that, yeah. He says no.
No way. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight. Even if it's a lost
Love
fight,
it.
I'm gonna give it a fight. I'm just always like that. I just don't like to give up.
I like
But
it. I like it. Cool.
I do see where it's coming from. He's basically, practically, obviously a bad position.
No,
You're playing
I like
a
it.
former world champion. Your likelihood of survival is somewhere, 10% for a draw and 90% for a loss.
Yeah.
And again, the 10% only comes into play.
Yeah. So
So I
yeah.
see where it's coming from as far as resigning.
So to summarize for you guys, we're talking about the strength of the diagonal, and then also he happens to have control of the file right here, and so it's even material. And so the question kind of remains, well, how would he actually use that? And so we're just trying to make a case for how that could be converted and try to sympathize a little bit with why his opponent sort of just resigned here. Because it's not necessarily enough to just have control over the diagonal, but really it looks like it's this, and then also the potential to come down like this, right?
Well, there are just basically two distinct advantages here for
Okay.
white, maybe even three. First, he's in the full control of the file. There is no contest there. And what does that mean? That means that he can use that file however he sees fit and use it to enter opponent's territory. What is open file? His ability to enter opponent's territory and attack his position. So he's pretty much in the full control of it, and he can and attack b6 pawn at will, more or less. He can trade queens. He can do it with the queens. Second thing he has, the diagonal is uncontested. That means that he's in full control of what's happening in this diagonal. He wants to go to c6 with the bishop. He can. He can play king h2 and bishop c6. He can play king h2 and knight d5. He can play rook a2, e3, and then knight d5. So the control of the diagonal is the second major thing. And the outpost on d5 is number three. So he's three advantages here in his favor and nothing in black's favor. Black has absolutely nothing going on.
Got it.
The only
Got
thing
it.
he can hope for is some sort of a cheapo with e4, try to distract white with some kind of tactic. Not likely to succeed, but at least an attempt.
Yeah.
After rook a2, I think that more or less is taken care of. And once that's taken care of, the rest of the game is obviously offering him practically no chances to survive.
Right. Right. Do you think you could beat Stockfish here? You think if I turn on
I would in this position with absolutely zero counterplay, I would beat Stockfish.
you think so? Yeah.
Yeah, I would beat Stockfish. It's a relatively simple technical position. Essentially, the game is you see it's 4 point advantage. You know, the rook is 5 points. Sure, Stockfish is a good player, but if I'm up a rook, I'm going to take on anybody.
Okay, let's see it. Let's see it. You want to play a few moves, just a few minutes? So you're playing at Stockfish, and I hit the target button, so you can train against it potentially. Because this is tough. It would probably take you a while. You're saying you would probably need like an hour-long time control or something.
Well, I would like to think about my moves and see
Yeah.
calculate it out and so on. I don't want to just make some quick speed chess moves and blunder something. I don't like that.
Okay, well, cool. That's good to know. Yeah, this is not a position where it's just automatically a win. You know, in blitz or something, you wouldn't have enough time. You still need to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I still need to think about it. I would assume that after e3, there's just not that much that can be done on defensive side. Knight b3, let's say, go bishop e1, and it turns out to be a mistake.
It's even.
Oh, I missed the cheapo. See, there you go. I missed the cheapo.
What was the cheapo?
Knight c1, knight c1, right there. There was a cheapo here.
Why did that work so well?
Well, pawn on d3 falls.
Oh. But then rook d2.
Yeah. No, you got to be careful here. You need to kind of think and weigh your moves. I think, I have no doubt they have a better position, but I just have no doubt that I have to be super careful. I think queen a8 is the best move here, just to make sure that you're not hanging any pieces. And then you play check, and he has to play rook to d8. Now your bishop is hanging. Say knight e4. And
uh-oh.
I lost. There you go. I blundered a piece. How about that? No, you see, this is the kind of thing that you need to think. You can't really play really fast moves here. You just need to think your way through. So probably, I'm guessing taking on d8 is a much better move. Again, bad move according to Stockfish.
All right, guys. Well, if you're up for a challenge, I'll put a link in the description below. If you guys are up for a challenge, especially for those of you who are more advanced, and then you can try to convert this. Yeah.
How do we win this? So what does the computer say about this one? Did we screw that up?
I think we'll end it there. But if we get commenters, who say that they'd like to see the ending to this, then let us know, and maybe we'll follow up with that, and we'll see the technique of something like this. But I think we should end it there. End it on a high note. And anything else that we should add in for this to conclude the video?
Well, it's very important to remember that no matter how good your position is, always take time, because it's very easy to ruin a good position. I think it was Emmanuel Lasker that once said, the hardest thing in the chess game is to win a winning. Yet most players, when they see that they're winning, they start playing really quickly. They get excited. They immediately think, oh, I'm winning. I'm going to beat this guy. This is going to be so great. And boom, they make a blunder. So you always want to make sure you take time, prepare your moves, calculate opponents' responses. Don't do hasty decisions.
Cool. Love it. All right. Thank you so much, Georgi. Okay.